Malcolm Mitchell stared at the text message from his CEO. Don't cancel. Trust me, she's worth meeting. He had every intention of bailing on this blind date. A black single father, exhausted from juggling a 6-year-old and a demanding career, Malcolm had long ago decided that romance belonged to another version of his life. One with more time, more energy, fewer responsibilities. Romance felt like another deadline he couldn't meet. But something in Adrienne Cole's message made him pause. She never wasted words, never pushed without reason. So he went. He walked into that upscale Chicago restaurant expecting a stranger. What he got instead was Adrienne herself, seated, composed, waiting. His boss had set him up with herself. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The moment Malcolm Mitchell saw Adrienne Cole sitting alone at the corner table, time seemed to fracture. Not stop, fracture. Like reality had split into two distinct possibilities, and he was standing at the exact point where both futures diverged. In one version, he turned around and walked out, pretended he'd never received her text. Let Monday morning swallow this moment whole and return to the careful, controlled rhythm of his life. School drop-offs, budget reviews, bedtime stories, repeat. In the other version, he stayed. He had no idea which future he was choosing. As his feet carried him forward, Adrienne looked up. Her expression didn't shift, didn't reveal surprise or triumph or nervousness. She simply watched him approach with the same steady intelligence she brought to quarterly earnings calls and boardroom negotiations. "Malcolm," she said, not a question, a statement, as if his presence had been inevitable. He stopped beside the chair opposite her, one dark brown hand still gripping his phone. "Adrienne, sit down." It wasn't a command. It wasn't a request. It was something in between, an invitation wrapped in certainty. He sat. The restaurant hummed around them, low jazz, the gentle percussion of silverware against china, conversations blurring into white noise. Lucia's was the kind of place where Chicago's elite came to be seen while pretending they valued privacy. The kind of room where Malcolm, a black man who had spent years learning exactly how to belong in spaces like this, kept his shoulders loose and his expression unreadable, even when every polished surface felt expensive enough to judge him. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, prix-fixe menus that cost more than Malcolm's weekly grocery bill. He'd been here once before, years ago, for his 5th wedding anniversary. The memory tasted bitter. You look like you're calculating an exit strategy," Adrienne said. Malcolm met her gaze. Her eyes were gray, a detail he'd never noticed in the fluorescent-lit conference rooms of Northbridge Dynamics. Gray like Lake Michigan before a storm. "I'm deciding whether to be angry or impressed," he admitted. "And still deciding?" The corner of her mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, something more dangerous than amusement. A server appeared, young, efficient, perfectly trained in the art of being present without intruding. "Good evening. Can I start you both with something to drink?" Adrienne didn't break eye contact with Malcolm. "Bring us the tasting menu and a bottle of the Côte Rôtie." "Excellent choice, Miss Cole." The server vanished. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "You're that certain I'm staying?" "No," Adrienne said. "I'm that certain you're curious." She wasn't wrong. 6 months ago, if someone had told Malcolm that his CEO would orchestrate her own blind date and list him as the target, he would have laughed. Adrienne Cole didn't date. She built. She acquired. She transformed struggling mid-tier consulting firms into industry leaders. She remembered the names of every employee's children, approved budgets without hesitation when the logic was sound, and had never, in the 3 years Malcolm had worked at Northbridge, revealed a single detail about her personal life. She wore tailored suits in shades of charcoal and navy. She arrived before everyone else and left after the lights went dark. She spoke 4 languages and had turned down acquisition offers from 2 Fortune 500 companies because she refused to surrender control of the company she'd built from nothing. Romance seemed as relevant to Adrienne Cole as horoscopes or small talk. Yet here she was. And here he was. "Why me?" Malcolm asked. Adrienne reached for her water glass, a gesture so controlled it revealed nothing. Because you're the only person at Northbridge who's ever disagreed with me in a meeting and been right. That was about the Detroit contract. I remember, she took a sip. You stood your ground, didn't apologize for challenging my assessment, didn't try to soften it with flattery or deflection. You treated me like I was wrong, not like I was the CEO. Malcolm remembered that meeting. He'd spent the entire weekend reviewing logistics data, building his case, preparing to go head-to-head with Adrienne over a contract he knew was flawed. In rooms like that, he'd learned a long time ago that a black man didn't get the luxury of showing up half-prepared and hoping confidence would carry him. So he had done the work. When Monday came, he had laid out his analysis with the certainty of someone who'd earned it. She'd listened, asked 3 precise questions, then agreed with him. The contract had been restructured. The client had been satisfied. Northbridge had saved face and money. He thought that was the end of it. Apparently not. That's your criteria for a date? Malcolm said. Professional disagreement? My criteria, Adrienne replied, is someone who sees me clearly and doesn't flinch. The first course arrived, seared scallops with a citrus reduction plated like artwork. Malcolm stared at the food, aware that he should say something. Deflect. Make a joke. Restore some sense of normality to a situation that had veered so far off course he couldn't locate the map. Instead, he picked up his fork. You could have just asked me to dinner, he said. Would you have said yes? He considered lying, decided against it. Probably not. Exactly. Adrienne cut into her scallop with surgical precision. You've been at Northbridge for 3 years. In that time, you've turned down every happy hour invitation, every team-building event, every opportunity to exist outside your carefully maintained boundaries. You're excellent at your job, Malcolm. You're also excellent at disappearing. The scallop was perfect. Malcolm barely tasted it. I have a son, he said. Sir, I know, Isaiah. He's 6. He likes dinosaurs and hates broccoli. You coach his soccer team even though you've never played soccer in your life. Malcolm set down his fork. You've been paying attention. I always pay attention. Adrienne's voice softened just slightly, just enough to land differently. You're not the only person in this room who's good at building walls, Malcolm. Outside, Chicago glittered. The skyline stretched against the October darkness, lights reflected in glass and steel. Malcolm had moved to the city 8 years ago for a job that no longer existed, married a woman who no longer wore his ring, and built a life that looked nothing like the one he'd imagined. He'd stopped imagining altogether somewhere along the way. This is insane, he said. Adrienne didn't argue. Probably. You're my boss. Technically, yes. There are policies. There are disclosures, Adrienne corrected, which I've already filed with HR preemptively. Malcolm laughed. He couldn't help it. The sound surprised him. Rusty from disuse. Inappropriate for the moment. Utterly genuine. You filed paperwork for a date that hasn't happened yet. I'm thorough. You're unbelievable. Also true. The second course arrived. Adrienne asked the server about the wine pairing. Malcolm watched her, the way she listened, the way she processed information, the way she existed in the world with absolute clarity about who she was and what she wanted. When had he lost that clarity? Somewhere between the divorce papers and the custody agreement. Somewhere between learning to braid Isaiah's hair and pretending he wasn't lonely. Somewhere in the space between being a good father and being a complete person. Tell me something, Adrienne said after the server left. When was the last time you did something that scared you? Malcolm thought about it, really thought about it. When I asked for full custody of Isaiah, he said finally, my ex wanted to split time 50-50. I knew Isaiah needed stability. I knew fighting for full custody meant burning bridges, hiring lawyers I couldn't afford, risking everything on the chance that a judge would see what I saw. But I did it anyway because he needed me to. Adrienne nodded slowly. And since then, since you won custody? Malcolm said nothing. She leaned forward. You've been living in reaction mode, Malcolm, responding to Isaiah's needs, to work deadlines, to everyone else's expectations. When was the last time you made a choice based solely on what you wanted? The question sat between them like a third presence at the table. I don't have the luxury of being selfish, Malcolm said. I'm not talking about selfish. I'm talking about alive. The wine arrived, rich, complex, earthy. Malcolm drank and felt warmth spread through his chest. Why are you really here? He asked. And don't tell me it's because I challenged you in a meeting. Adrienne swirled her wine, watching the liquid catch the light. When she spoke, her voice carried something Malcolm had never heard before. Vulnerability. I'm 41 years old, she said. I built a company from nothing. I have more money than I'll ever spend, more success than I ever imagined, and absolutely no one to share it with. I've spent 2 decades telling myself that work was enough, that achievement was fulfillment, that I didn't need anything else. She set down her glass. I was wrong. Malcolm felt something shift in his chest. Recognition, maybe, or resonance. 3 months ago, Adrienne continued, I attended a conference in Boston. Industry leaders, networking events, the usual performance. On the last night, I sat alone in my hotel room, looking at the city through a wall of glass. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a conversation that wasn't transactional. The last time someone asked me a question they didn't already know the answer to. The last time I felt like a person instead of a position. She met his eyes. I came back to Chicago and started paying attention, really paying attention. And I noticed you, Malcolm. I noticed how you talk to Isaiah on the phone during lunch breaks, how you keep a photo of him on your desk, both of you smiling so hard it lights up the whole frame, how you smile differently when you're talking about him versus talking about work. You're present in your life in a way most people aren't. And I thought, she paused, I thought maybe someone like that could teach me how to be present in mine. The third course arrived. Neither of them touched it. Malcolm exhaled slowly. That's a lot to put on someone you barely know. I know you better than you think. You know my work persona. I know you leave the office at exactly 5:15 every day, no matter what crisis is unfolding, because Isaiah gets out of after-school care at 5:30. I know you volunteer to take the early morning flights to client sites so you can be home for bedtime. I know you turned down the VP promotion last year because it would have required relocation. I know. Okay, Malcolm held up a hand. Point made. I'm not asking for the relationship, Malcolm. I'm asking for honesty. One dinner. This dinner. No office politics, no expectations, just 2 people talking like people. And after tonight, Adrienne's expression remained steady. After tonight, we see if there's anything worth exploring, or we finish our wine, shake hands, and Monday morning returns to normal. Your choice. It should have felt like pressure. Instead, it felt like freedom. Malcolm picked up his fork. Tell me something nobody at work knows about you. Adrienne blinked. It was the first time he'd seen her genuinely surprised. Something nobody knows, she repeated. You want honesty? Start there. She considered this, took a sip of wine, set the glass down with deliberate care. I'm afraid of dogs, she said. Malcolm waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. You're afraid of dogs, he said flatly. Terrified. Have been since I was 7 and a neighbor's German shepherd knocked me down. Completely irrational, I know. Most dogs are harmless. Doesn't matter. I see a dog, I cross the street. Adrienne Cole, CEO of a multi-million-dollar firm, afraid of golden retrievers and poodles and chihuahuas especially. Those things are demons. Malcolm laughed again. This time it felt easier, natural. Your turn, Adrienne said. My turn? What? Something nobody knows. He thought about deflecting. Old habits. Instead, he let the truth surface. I'm terrified I'm failing Isaiah, Malcolm said quietly. Every single day. I read parenting books like they're instruction manuals. I second-guess every decision. I lie awake wondering if I'm giving him enough attention, too much attention, the right kind of attention. His teacher mentioned he was quiet in class last week, and I spent 3 nights convinced I'd somehow broken him by getting divorced. Adrienne didn't offer platitudes, didn't tell him he was doing fine or that all parents felt that way. She just listened. My ex-wife told me once that I was going to suffocate him with worry, Malcolm continued. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'm so busy trying to be everything he needs that I'm not actually seeing who he is. What do you see when you look at him? Adrienne asked. Malcolm smiled despite himself. A kid who asks a million questions, who builds elaborate Lego cities and gives them detailed backstories, who cries during sad movies but pretends he doesn't, who tells me he loves me every night before bed like he's afraid I might forget. He sounds wonderful. He is. Then you're not failing him. You can't know that. I know you show up, Adrienne said. I know you prioritize him above everything else, including your career. I know he has a father who worries about getting it right, which means he has a father who cares. That's not failure, Malcolm. That's love. Something in Malcolm's throat tightened. The fourth course came and went. They talked about Chicago, how Adrienne had arrived 15 years ago with an MBA and a business plan, how Malcolm had moved for a marketing job at a tech startup that collapsed 6 months later. They talked about terrible first apartments and worse first jobs. They talked about the city itself, the architecture, the winters, the way Lake Michigan could look like an ocean if you squinted. They didn't talk about work, didn't talk about Northbridge or clients or quarterly projections. They talked like people. By the time dessert arrived, a dark chocolate torte with raspberry coulis, Malcolm had lost track of time entirely. The restaurant had emptied around them. The jazz had shifted to something slower, sadder, more intimate. "Can I ask you something?" Malcolm said. "Always." "Why now? Why decide after 20 years that you wanted something different?" Adrienne's fingers traced the edge of her dessert plate. "My father died last year, cancer. He was 73. I'm sorry. He built houses, not developments or investment properties, actual houses. He'd spend months on a single project, getting every detail right, crown molding, custom cabinets, built-in bookshelves. He poured everything into making these perfect homes for other people. And when he died, he was living in a studio apartment because he'd never taken the time to build something for himself." She looked up. "At his funeral, people told me stories. The family whose dream home he'd built. The couple whose kitchen he'd renovated after a fire. All these lives he'd touched. But when I went through his things, there were no photos, no mementos, no evidence of a life outside of work. Just tools and blueprints and unrealized plans." Her voice didn't waver, but Malcolm heard the grief underneath. "I looked at his empty apartment and saw my own future," Adrienne said. "A successful business, a solid reputation, and absolutely nothing that mattered. So you decided to arrange your own blind date. I decided to stop waiting for life to happen to me." Malcolm understood more than he wanted to admit. They finished dessert in comfortable silence. When the check arrived, Adrienne paid before Malcolm could protest. "Company card," she said. "I'm expensing this as executive team development. That's wildly inappropriate." I know." She smiled, a real smile this time, warm and slightly wicked. "I'll probably get a strongly worded memo from accounting." Outside, October air bit at exposed skin. Chicago's downtown gleamed around them, all glass and steel and ambition. Malcolm had walked these streets 1,000 times. Tonight they felt different. "I should get home," he said. "Isaiah's with a sitter." "Of course." They stood on the sidewalk, breath visible in the cold air. Malcolm knew he should say goodnight, get in his car, drive back to his townhouse in Lincoln Park, where Isaiah was probably asleep and the sitter was probably bored. Instead, he said, "I had a good time tonight." "So did I. This was crazy." "Completely insane," Adrienne agreed. "If we do this, if we try this, it gets complicated." "Life is already complicated, Malcolm. You know what I mean. Work." "Isaiah." "The optics. HR might have been notified, but people will talk. They'll have opinions." "Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're the CEO, which means I have more to lose." Adrienne stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that Malcolm could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. "I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking if there's enough here to warrant another conversation." Malcolm thought about the last 2 hours, the honesty, the laughter, the way Adrienne had looked at him like he was Malcolm, not just an employee or a single father or a demographic. "Yeah," he said, "there's enough." "Good." She turned to leave, then paused. "Malcolm, one more thing." "What?" "Thank you for staying." She walked to her car, a sleek black Tesla that somehow suited her perfectly. Malcolm watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into Chicago's arterial flow. He stood there for a long time, cold air clearing his head, trying to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister who was watching Isaiah. "He's asleep, take your time. How's the mysterious date?" Malcolm typed back, "Complicated." Her response came immediately. "Good complicated or bad complicated?" He looked at the restaurant behind him, then at the city, stretching in all directions. "Not sure yet." But when he got in his car and started the drive home, Malcolm realized he was smiling. Really smiling. The kind of smile that had nothing to do with being polite or appropriate, and everything to do with feeling something he'd forgotten how to name. Hope, maybe, possibly. He was still smiling when he got home, paid his sister, checked on Isaiah asleep in a tangle of dinosaur sheets, dark curls scattered across the pillow, and stood in his kitchen thinking about gray eyes and uncomfortable questions, and the way Adrienne Cole had looked at him across a table and asked him to be honest. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "This is Adrienne. I got your number from your employee file." "Inappropriate, I know. I wanted to say goodnight." Malcolm saved the contact, typed back, "Good night, Adrienne." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Same time next week?" Malcolm looked around his quiet house, at the soccer schedule on the refrigerator, at Isaiah's backpack by the door, at the careful, controlled life he'd built from the wreckage of his marriage. Then he typed, "Yes." The response was immediate. "Good." Malcolm set down his phone, walked to Isaiah's room, stood in the doorway watching his son sleep, chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. "Your dad might be doing something crazy," he whispered to the darkness. Isaiah didn't stir. Malcolm thought about what Adrienne had said, about being alive instead of just responsive, about making choices based on what he wanted, not just what everyone else needed. He thought about the way she'd admitted her fear of dogs with the same straightforward honesty she brought to board meetings, the way she'd listened to him talk about Isaiah without judgment or advice, the way she'd looked at him like she was seeing someone, not something. Monday morning would come with all its complications. Colleagues would notice. Questions would surface. The careful professional distance he'd maintained for 3 years would shatter. But standing in his son's doorway, Malcolm realized he was tired of distance, tired of careful, tired of building walls and calling it protection. Maybe it was time to risk something that scared him. Maybe Adrienne Cole, CEO and orchestrator of blind dates, was exactly the kind of risk worth taking. His phone buzzed one more time. "Sleep well, Malcolm." He typed back, "You too. Thank you for tonight." Her response came as he was putting the phone down. "Thank you for saying yes." Malcolm stood there for a moment longer, then turned off the light and walked to his own room. Tomorrow he'd wake up and make Isaiah pancakes. Tomorrow he'd coach soccer and review client files and maintain all the routines that made his life functional. But tonight he'd fallen asleep thinking about possibility instead of obligation. And that felt like something worth protecting. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Malcolm stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time, aware that he was stalling. Same face, same routine, everything different. Deep brown skin, close-cropped curls, a navy tie he'd worn a dozen times before, and underneath it all, a man who no longer trusted his life to stay neatly arranged. Isaiah sat at the couch and table eating cereal, backpack already by the door, blissfully unaware that his father's world had tilted on its axis over chocolate torte and impossible honesty. "Dad, we're going to be late," Isaiah called. 2 minutes. Malcolm stared at his reflection. His phone sat on the counter, Adrienne's last message still visible on the lock screen. "Sleep well, Malcolm." He'd read it 4 times before finally falling asleep, twice more when he woke up. The drive to Isaiah's school passed in a blur of traffic and scattered conversation about upcoming show and tell. Malcolm barely registered the words. His mind kept circling back to Saturday night. The way Adrienne's voice had softened when she talked about her father. The way she'd looked at him like he was a puzzle worth solving. "Dad?" Malcolm blinked. They'd arrived at Lakeside Elementary. Kids poured from cars in a chaos of backpacks and shouted goodbyes. "Yeah, buddy." "You okay? You're being weird." "I'm fine." Isaiah studied him with the uncomfortable perception 6-year-olds sometimes possessed. You look scared." "I'm not scared." "You look like you did before the parent-teacher conference." Malcolm managed a smile. That was different. "Mrs. Patterson said I was doing great." "I know. Get going or you'll be late." Isaiah unbuckled his seatbelt, then paused. "Is it a girl?" Malcolm's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What?" "Aunt Michelle says when grown-ups act weird, it's usually about a girl or taxes. But you always act weird about taxes, so I figured." Isaiah grinned, a wide grin in a warm brown face so full of mischief, Malcolm almost forgot to breathe, then scrambled out of the car. Malcolm watched him run toward the entrance, dinosaur backpack bouncing, and wondered when his son had gotten so perceptive. The drive to Northbridge Dynamics took 20 minutes. Malcolm spent 19 of them rehearsing what he'd say if he ran into Adrienne. Casual greeting, professional distance, no acknowledgement of Saturday night beyond maybe a polite nod. By the time he pulled into the parking garage, he'd convinced himself it would be fine. Then he saw her car. The black Tesla sat in its reserved spot near the elevator, and Malcolm felt his carefully constructed composure crack. She was here. Of course she was here. She was always here before everyone else. But knowing that intellectually and confronting it physically were different things entirely. He parked 3 levels up, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and entered through the side entrance like a man avoiding detection. The Northbridge offices occupied floors 12 through 15 of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. Malcolm's desk sat in an open-plan area on 14, surrounded by other senior managers and the low hum of productivity. He'd always liked the energy here, the sense of forward motion, of problems being solved and deals being closed. Today, it felt like walking onto a stage. "Morning, Malcolm." He turned. Jennifer Kim from Client Services, coffee in hand, smile bright. "Morning. Good weekend?" The question was innocent. Standard Monday small talk. Malcolm heard interrogation. "Yeah. We took the kids to the zoo. Total chaos." She laughed. "Hey, did you hear about the Henderson account? Apparently we're..." Malcolm nodded along, tracking her words while his peripheral vision scanned for any sign of Adrienne. The CEO's office sat on 15, separated from the general workforce by frosted glass and the unspoken understanding that you didn't just drop by. He'd been up there exactly 4 times in 3 years. Twice for performance reviews, once for the Detroit contract meeting, once when Isaiah had gotten sick at school and Malcolm needed emergency approval to leave early. He'd never thought about the layout before. Now he was hyper-aware of sightlines and potential encounters. "So what do you think?" Malcolm refocused on Jennifer. "Sorry, what?" She raised an eyebrow. "You okay? You seem distracted." "Just tired. Isaiah had nightmares." The lie came easily, too easily. Jennifer nodded sympathetically and moved on. Malcolm exhaled and headed to his desk. 3 emails waited in his inbox. 2 were routine client updates. The third made his pulse spike. From Adrienne Cole. Subject Q4 strategy session. Sent 6:47 a.m. "Malcolm, please stop by my office at 10:30 to discuss operational priorities for the Henderson transition. Bring the logistics framework you presented in August." A CEO's email. Professional, impersonal? Exactly what a CEO would send to a senior manager. Malcolm read it twice anyway, searching for subtext that wasn't there. The morning crawled. Malcolm sat through a team meeting about resource allocation, contributed appropriately, and forgot every word the moment he left the conference room. At 10:15, he gathered the Henderson files, straightened his tie again, and took the elevator to 15. Adrienne's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, who'd been with the company since its founding, looked up as he approached. "Malcolm Mitchell for Miss Cole." "Go ahead. She's expecting you." He knocked twice, heard Adrienne's voice, "Come in," and opened the door. The CEO's office was exactly what Malcolm expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, minimalist furniture, a desk that probably cost more than his car. What he didn't expect was how different Adrienne looked here. She wore a navy suit that was all business, her hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed something on her laptop. This was Adrienne Cole, CEO. The woman who'd admitted to fearing chihuahuas felt like a separate person entirely. "Close the door," she said without looking up. Malcolm did. She finished whatever she was reading, removed her glasses, and finally met his eyes. "Good morning." "Morning. How was the rest of your weekend?" The question was casual. Her expression wasn't. Malcolm said, "Isaiah had soccer. We got ice cream after, the usual." "Did you tell him about dinner?" "He asked if I was acting weird about a girl." Adrienne's lips quirked. Perceptive kid. Terrifyingly so. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but loaded. Malcolm realized he was still standing near the door, like he might need to escape. "Sit," Adrienne said. He sat in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. The distance felt both too much and not enough. "We should talk about parameters," Adrienne said. "Parameters? If we're doing this, and I think we are, we need to be smart about it." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Smart how?" At work, I'm your CEO. You're a senior manager reporting to the operations VP who reports to me. We maintain professional boundaries. No personal conversations in the office, no preferential treatment, no perception of impropriety. And outside of work? Adrienne's expression softened fractionally. Outside of work, we figure it out as we go. That's not very structured. I know. She leaned back in her chair. Terrifying, isn't it? Malcolm found himself almost smiling. When's our next dinner? Saturday, unless you have Isaiah. My ex has him this weekend. Something flickered across Adrienne's face. Relief, maybe, or anticipation. Then Saturday, I'll text you details. Okay. They looked at each other. The office felt smaller than it had moments ago. Was there actually anything you needed to discuss about Henderson? Malcolm asked. Yes, but it can wait until the Thursday operations meeting. Adrienne picked up her glasses, a clear dismissal. I just wanted to see you. The admission landed like a physical thing. Malcolm stood, walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. Adrienne. Yes? I wanted to see you too. He left before she could respond, before the careful professional distance they just agreed upon could shatter completely. Patricia barely glanced up as he passed. The elevator ride back to 14 felt like decompression. Malcolm made it to his desk, opened the Henderson files, and stared at spreadsheets without comprehending a single number. His phone buzzed. That was harder than I expected. Malcolm glanced around. No one was watching. He typed back quickly. What was? Letting you leave. He set the phone down like it had burned him. Picked it up again. Typed. Saturday feels far away. Then we'll make it count. The week unfolded with painful slowness. Malcolm maintained his routine. Work, Isaiah, soccer practice, bedtime stories, while simultaneously feeling like he was living someone else's life. Wednesday brought a client presentation that should have consumed his full attention. Instead, he caught himself wondering what Adrienne was doing. Thursday's operations meeting put them in the same conference room for 90 minutes. She called on him twice for input. Their eyes met exactly once. It lasted 3 seconds and felt like freefall. Friday evening, Isaiah came home from his mother's apartment early, dumped his overnight bag by the door, and announced he was hungry. What happened? Malcolm asked. I thought you were staying until Sunday. Mom has a work thing. Isaiah shrugged with the practiced indifference of a child used to schedule changes. Can we order pizza? Malcolm texted his ex, everything okay? Got back a fine client emergency and ordered pepperoni. They ate on the couch, watching nature documentaries. Isaiah provided running commentary about velociraptors. Malcolm pretended to listen while mentally recalculating his weekend. He'd have to cancel Saturday, find a sitter on short notice, or bring Isaiah along. Or, Dad, you're doing it again. Doing what? Being weird and spacey. Malcolm set down his pizza. Buddy, can I ask you something? Is it about the girl? How do you... Never mind, yes. Isaiah perked up with the unmistakable interest of a child sensing adult secrets. Is she nice? Very nice. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know. That's important, Dad. You should ask. Malcolm smiled despite himself. I'll keep that in mind. Are you going to marry her? The question hit like a bucket of cold water. Whoa, slow down. We've had one dinner. But you like her? It's complicated. Isaiah considered this with unexpected seriousness. Mom says you never like anybody. Malcolm felt something twist in his chest. Mom said that to you? I heard her on the phone with Grandma. She said you were married to your calendar. Isaiah paused. What does that mean? It means... Malcolm stopped, started over. It means I've been focused on other things. On you mostly. You don't have to just focus on me. I want to. I know, but Aunt Michelle says everybody needs grown-up friends. And Trevor's mom has a boyfriend now. And Trevor says it's weird, but... Okay. Isaiah took another bite of pizza. I think you should see the girl again if she's nice. Malcolm looked at his son, this small person who somehow contained more emotional intelligence than most adults, and felt a surge of love so fierce it was almost painful. She is nice, he said quietly. She's actually pretty amazing. Then definitely see her again, even if it means I'm around less sometimes. Isaiah rolled his eyes with perfect 6-year-old exasperation. Dad, you're around all the time. Like, all the time. You even came to the field trip to the aquarium and you hate fish. I don't hate fish. You said they smell like sadness. Malcolm couldn't argue with that. Fair point. So, when are you seeing her? Tomorrow, maybe. I need to figure out. I can go to Aunt Michelle's. Isaiah said it too quickly. What? She said I could come over whenever. She has the new Lego set, the big castle one. Isaiah's eyes went wide with manufactured innocence. It would be really helpful if I could go there tomorrow. Malcolm shook his head, half amused, half amazed. You're conspiring to get me a social life. I'm helping, that's different. Later, after Isaiah was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Malcolm texted his sister. Can Isaiah stay with you tomorrow? Michelle responded immediately. Emergency? The kind where my son is actively trying to set me up. I love that child. Yes, bring him over. Details required. Malcolm hesitated, then typed. I'm seeing someone. Maybe. It's new. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Malcolm Mitchell has a date. Alert the media. Who is she? Long story. I have time. Tomorrow, I promise. Fine, but I expect full disclosure. Drop Isaiah off at 10 o'clock. Malcolm set down his phone and opened his messages to Adrienne. Change of plans. I have Isaiah tomorrow. Her response came faster than he expected. Bring him. Malcolm stared at the screen, typed. Are you sure? Completely. I'd like to meet him. If you're comfortable with that. Is he comfortable? Malcolm thought about Isaiah's casual acceptance, his matter-of-fact support, his complete lack of judgment. Thought about keeping Adrienne separate from this part of his life versus letting the walls start coming down. He typed, okay, but fair warning, he's going to ask if you like dinosaurs. What's the right answer? That they're fascinating and velociraptors are underappreciated. I'll study up. Malcolm found himself grinning at his phone like a teenager. Where should we meet? Millennium Park, 2 p.m. by the Bean. The Bean! I've lived in Chicago for 15 years and never actually seen it. Seemed like time. Adrienne Cole, tourist attraction enthusiast. I'm full of surprises. I'm learning that. Malcolm set down his phone and sat in the darkness of his living room, listening to the city hum beyond his windows. Tomorrow, he'd introduce Adrienne to Isaiah. Tomorrow, the careful separation between his personal life and this new, fragile thing with Adrienne would dissolve. Tomorrow felt enormous. But sitting there, Malcolm realized he wasn't scared. He was ready. Saturday dawned clear and unseasonably warm for late October. Isaiah woke up full of questions about where they were going and who they were meeting, and could they get hot dogs, because the ones at the park were the best. We're meeting my friend, Malcolm said, helping Isaiah into a jacket he probably wouldn't need. The girlfriend? Yes. What's her name? Adrienne. Isaiah tested it out. Adrienne, that's fancy. She's pretty fancy. Fancier than Mom. Malcolm froze in the middle of tying his own shoes. That's not... It's different, buddy. Your mom and Adrienne are different people. But you like Adrienne more. I like Adrienne differently. Isaiah seemed satisfied with this distinction. They took the L into downtown. Isaiah pressed against the window, watching the city scroll past. Malcolm checked his phone 3 times. No messages. At 1:50, they walked into Millennium Park. The Bean, officially Cloud Gate, but no one called it that, gleamed in the afternoon sun, its mirrored surface reflecting Chicago's skyline in warped, beautiful distortion. Tourists clustered around it, taking photos, laughing, touching the smooth steel. Malcolm scanned the crowd. Didn't see her? Checked his phone again. Is that her? Isaiah was pointing. Malcolm followed his gaze. Adrienne stood near the edge of the Bean's perimeter, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater, her hair down, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked nothing like the CEO in the navy suit. She looked real. Their eyes met across 50 feet of concrete and crowd noise. Malcolm felt his heart do something complicated. Come on, he said to Isaiah. They walked over. Adrienne watched them approach, and Malcolm tried to see her through Isaiah's eyes. The stranger his father had taken him to meet, who represented some undefined change in the familiar landscape of their life. Hi, Adrienne said when they reached her. Hi, Malcolm gestured to Isaiah. This is Isaiah. Isaiah, this is Adrienne. Isaiah stepped forward and, to Malcolm's complete surprise, extended his hand. Nice to meet you. Adrienne shook it solemnly. Nice to meet you too. Dad says you're fancy. It's true, Adrienne said, eyes sparkling. I'm incredibly fancy. I own 3 different types of salad forks. Isaiah's face scrunched in confusion. Why? That's an excellent question. I have no idea. Do you like dinosaurs? I think they're fascinating, especially velociraptors. Very underappreciated. Isaiah lit up. He launched into an explanation of velociraptor hunting patterns that somehow connected to Jurassic period climate and continental drift. Adrienne listened with complete attention, asking questions that weren't condescending, engaging with his enthusiasm like it mattered. Malcolm watched them and felt something in his chest expand. So really, they were probably smarter than we think, Isaiah finished. That makes sense, Adrienne said. Your dad mentioned you know a lot about dinosaurs. He wasn't exaggerating. Dad doesn't know anything about dinosaurs. He thinks pterodactyls are dinosaurs. They're not? Adrienne looked at Malcolm with mock shock. Flying reptiles, Malcolm said. I've been corrected approximately 400 times. 47, Isaiah said cheerfully. They walked around the bean, Isaiah running ahead to press his hands against the reflective surface, Adrienne and Malcolm following at a slower pace. He's wonderful, Adrienne said quietly. He's a good kid. He's more than good. He's sharp and curious and surprisingly confident. The confidence is new. Took him a while to adjust after the divorce. How long has it been? 2 years. Final paperwork went through in March. Malcolm shoved his hands in his pockets. We tried therapy first, couples counseling, did the whole stay together for the kid routine, but we were just making each other miserable. What happened? Malcolm watched Isaiah examine his own reflection, stretched and distorted in the bean's curve. We wanted different things. She wanted the life we'd planned when we were 25. Big house in the suburbs, corporate ladder climbing, country club memberships. I wanted... He paused. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew it wasn't that. And Isaiah was the only good thing we managed to create together. Malcolm smiled faintly. She's not a bad person. We're just bad together now. We're cordial co-parents who can barely manage small talk. Adrienne nodded. They walked in silence for a moment. I was engaged once, she said. Malcolm looked at her. You were? 7 years ago, his name was Marcus. We met at a conference in New York. He was charming and ambitious and said all the right things about supporting my career. What happened? I started Northbridge, poured everything into building the company, worked 18-hour days, canceled plans constantly, missed his birthday, our anniversary, his sister's wedding. Adrienne's voice stayed level, but Malcolm heard the old wound underneath. He said he felt like an accessory to my life, said I loved my work more than I loved him. Was he right? Yes. She met Malcolm's eyes. I did love my work more because work was safe. Work was controllable. Work didn't ask me to be vulnerable or compromise or risk anything except money. Did you tell him that? I told him I was sorry but couldn't change. He left. I pretended I was fine, threw myself into Northbridge even harder. Adrienne looked at Isaiah, who was now running circles around the bean's perimeter. I haven't dated anyone seriously since. 7 years. 7 years. Malcolm processed this. Why me? Why now? Adrienne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because you scare me in the right way. Marcus scared me because wanting him felt like weakness. You scare me because wanting you feels like strength. Before Malcolm could respond, Isaiah came running back, breathless and grinning. Can we get ice cream? It's October, Malcolm said. So? Adrienne laughed. He makes a valid point. They walked to a vendor selling gelato. Isaiah debated flavors with the seriousness of a UN negotiation before settling on chocolate chip. Adrienne got pistachio. Malcolm got nothing, claiming he wasn't hungry, then stole bites from both of them. They found a bench overlooking the park. Isaiah ate his gelato and provided running commentary on passing dogs, their breeds, probable names, and whether they looked friendly. Adrienne asked questions. Malcolm watched the two of them interact and felt the walls he'd built around his heart start to crack. That one's a corgi, Isaiah said, pointing at a small dog with disproportionately large ears. They're the queen's favorite. The English queen, not the chess one. Important distinction, Adrienne said seriously. The corgi trotted closer. Its owner, a woman in yoga pants, smiled apologetically as the dog sniffed around their bench. Adrienne went very still. Malcolm noticed, remembered. The corgi, oblivious to canine politics, moved toward Adrienne's legs. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat frozen like a rabbit spotting a hawk. Malcolm stood smoothly. Isaiah, want to show me that tree you were looking at? What tree? The big one over there. Come on. He guided Isaiah away, giving Adrienne space. The corgi's owner called her pet back and moved on. When Malcolm glanced back, Adrienne had exhaled, shoulders dropping. They returned to the bench. Isaiah immediately launched into a new topic. Adrienne caught Malcolm's eye, mouthed, "Thank you," and smiled. The afternoon drifted past. They walked through the park, watched street performers, argued about which buildings downtown were the most architecturally interesting. Isaiah grew tired around 4 o'clock and climbed onto Malcolm's shoulders. His weight was familiar, comforting, right. "I should get him home," Malcolm said. "Of course." They walked toward the L station. Isaiah dozed against Malcolm's shoulder, small and warm. Adrienne walked beside them, close enough that their arms occasionally brushed. At the station entrance, they stopped. "Thank you for today," Malcolm said. "Thank you for bringing him. He liked you." "I liked him a lot." Isaiah stirred, lifted his head. "Are we home?" "Almost, buddy." He blinked sleepily at Adrienne. "Are you coming over?" "Not tonight." "Okay, will I see you again?" Adrienne looked at Malcolm. Malcolm looked at her. The question hung between them about more than just Isaiah's curiosity. "I hope so," Adrienne said. "Cool." Isaiah dropped his head back onto Malcolm's shoulder. "You're nicer than I thought fancy people would be." Adrienne laughed, a real, unguarded sound. That might be the best compliment I've ever received. They stood there, the three of them, Chicago moving around them in its endless Saturday afternoon rhythm. Malcolm knew he should say goodbye, get on the train, maintain boundaries. Instead, he said, "Have dinner with us tomorrow, at my place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and probably a dinosaur documentary." Adrienne's smile was small and real. "I'd love that. 6 o'clock. I'll bring wine." "Deal." She reached out, squeezed his hand once, and walked away. Malcolm watched her go, Isaiah's weight steady on his shoulders, and felt the future shift into something he couldn't predict but didn't fear. On the train ride home, Isaiah woke up enough to ask, "Do you love her?" Malcolm thought about honesty, about teaching his son what it looked like to be brave. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I think I could." "That's good," Isaiah said, and fell back asleep. Malcolm leaned his head against the window, watched Chicago blur past, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to want something for himself. That maybe being alive and being a good father weren't mutually exclusive. That maybe Adrienne Cole was exactly what he didn't know he'd been looking for. Sunday dinner became a revelation in the ordinary. Adrienne arrived at 6:15 carrying a bottle of Bordeaux that probably cost more than Malcolm's monthly grocery budget and a children's book about paleontology she'd found at a bookstore downtown. Isaiah's eyes went wide when she handed it to him. "It has feathered dinosaurs," she said. The author argues that most of what we think we know about the Cretaceous period is wrong. Isaiah clutched the book like it was treasure. "Can I read it now?" "After dinner," Malcolm said. "Go wash your hands." Isaiah disappeared down the hall. Adrienne stood in the entryway of Malcolm's townhouse, taking in the space with the same focused attention she brought to quarterly reports. The living room was small but lived in. Books on shelves. Isaiah's drawings magneted to the refrigerator. A worn couch facing a television that was definitely not top of the line. "It's not much," Malcolm said. "It's wonderful." Adrienne turned to him. "It feels like a home." Something in the way she said it made Malcolm realize how long she'd been living in spaces that didn't. He took the wine, their fingers brushing, and the contact felt electric. "Kitchen's this way." He'd made pasta carbonara. Nothing fancy, just the recipe his mother had taught him before she'd passed, back when he still thought cooking was something you did to impress people instead of something you did to feed the ones you loved. The bacon was crisping in the pan, water boiling, eggs waiting to be tempered. Adrienne leaned against the counter, watching him work. Dressed down in jeans and a soft sweater the color of smoke, she still carried herself with that particular grace that came from years of commanding rooms. "Can I help?" she asked. You can open the wine." "I'm qualified for that." She found glasses in the cabinet without having to ask where they were kept, poured 2 generous servings, and handed one to Malcolm. Their eyes met over the rims of the glasses. Neither of them drank. "This feels domestic," Adrienne said quietly. "Is that okay?" I don't know. I've never really done domestic before." "Neither have I. Not like this." Isaiah thundered back into the kitchen, hands dripping wet, the dinosaur book tucked under one arm. "Dad, did you know that some scientists think T-Rex might have had lips?" "I did not know that." "It's in chapter 3. Adrienne, did you read this already?" "Just the first few pages," she said. "I wanted to make sure it was accurate before I gave it to you." Isaiah looked at her with something approaching awe. You checked if it was real science. Of course, bad information is worse than no information. Malcolm watched his son process this. Watched the moment Adrienne went from dad's friend to someone worth respecting on her own merits. It was a small shift, barely perceptible, but Malcolm saw it, felt it. They ate at the small dining table, Isaiah between them. Dinner conversation bounced from dinosaurs to Chicago pizza preferences to whether aliens probably existed. Adrienne engaged with Isaiah's questions seriously, never talking down to him, never pretending to have answers she didn't have. What do you think happens when we die? Isaiah asked suddenly. The kind of question 6-year-olds dropped like grenades into casual conversation. Malcolm froze mid-bite. Adrienne didn't. I think we become part of the world in a different way, she said. The energy that made us doesn't disappear. It just changes form. We become part of the soil, the air, the things that grow. We continue, just not as ourselves. Isaiah considered this. So we could become trees, essentially. That's cool. I'd want to be a redwood. Those are the tallest trees. Good choice. After dinner, Isaiah insisted on showing Adrienne his room. Malcolm followed them upstairs, watching Adrienne take in the chaos of Legos and dinosaur posters and books stacked in precarious towers. This is my collection, Isaiah said, gesturing to a shelf holding every dinosaur figurine he'd ever acquired. They're organized by period, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. That's very thorough. Dad helped. He's good at organizing. He organizes everything. Isaiah paused, sometimes too much. Adrienne glanced at Malcolm, amusement flickering in her eyes. Is that right? I like structure, Malcolm said. He has a spreadsheet for groceries, Isaiah added, with categories. That's actually impressive. It's excessive, Malcolm corrected. It's both. Isaiah pulled out his favorite figurine, a velociraptor with articulated joints, and launched into an explanation of pack hunting behavior. Adrienne sat on the floor cross-legged, listening with absolute focus. Malcolm leaned against the doorframe and felt his heart do something dangerous. This was what terrified him. Not the relationship itself, but how easily Adrienne fit into the life he'd built. How naturally she occupied space in his home, with his son, in the quiet, ordinary moments that made up real life instead of performance. At 7:30, Malcolm called bedtime. Isaiah protested, but weakly, already rubbing his eyes. Can Adrienne read me a story? He asked. Malcolm looked at her. She looked back, something vulnerable crossing her face. If she wants to, Malcolm said. I'd like that. They settled into Isaiah's bed, Isaiah under the covers, Adrienne perched on the edge, Malcolm standing in the doorway. She read from the dinosaur book, her voice steady and warm, and Isaiah's eyes grew heavier with each page. By chapter 2, he was asleep. Adrienne closed the book carefully, tucked it on the nightstand, and stood. She looked down at Isaiah, this small person who'd accepted her without question, and Malcolm saw her face do something complicated. You okay? He whispered. She nodded, didn't speak. They left the room, pulling the door almost closed, and stood in the hallway breathing each other's air. Thank you for tonight, Adrienne said. You don't have to thank me. I do. She gestured vaguely. I've never been part of something like this. Something real and ordinary and what? Terrifying. Malcolm understood. He stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, close enough to see the uncertainty she usually hid behind competence. You want to stay for a while? He asked. Isaiah's down for the night. We could talk, or not talk, whatever you want. Adrienne looked at him for a long moment. I should go. Okay, but I don't want to. So stay, Adrienne, just for a little while. No pressure, no expectations, just stay. She exhaled, nodded. They went back downstairs. Malcolm poured more wine. They settled on the couch, the television off, just the low light from the kitchen illuminating the space. Tell me about Marcus, Malcolm said. Adrienne's hand tightened on her wine glass. Why? Because he's part of your story. Because you said you haven't dated seriously in 7 years, and I want to understand why. It's not interesting. Let me decide that. She was quiet for so long, Malcolm thought she wouldn't answer. Then she started talking. We met at a venture capital conference in Manhattan. I'd just started Northbridge. Barely 6 months in, already drowning in debt and doubt. Marcus was there representing his firm, looking at tech startups. He was charming, confident. He made me feel like maybe I could actually pull this off. She took a sip of wine. We dated for 2 years. He said he admired my ambition, supported my goals, told me he wanted a partner, not a housewife. I believed him. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. What changed? I did. The company started growing. I started winning contracts, hiring employees, actually building something, and the more successful I became, the smaller Marcus felt. He started making comments, little things at first, jokes about me being married to my work, suggestions that I delegate more, questions about whether I really needed to work such long hours. Adrienne set down her glass. Then the comments became arguments. He wanted me home for dinner, wanted weekends that didn't involve me checking emails, wanted me to turn down opportunities because they'd require travel. He said he felt like a prop in my life, an accessory I brought to company events and ignored otherwise. Were you ignoring him? Yes. She met Malcolm's eyes. I was, because every time I tried to let him in, to share what I was building, he made it about him, about how my success made him feel inadequate, about how I was choosing work over us. And I realized, her voice caught. I realized I was choosing work because work didn't make me feel guilty for wanting more. Work didn't ask me to shrink so someone else could feel bigger. Malcolm watched her, saw the old pain still fresh underneath the surface. So he left, Adrienne continued. Gave me an ultimatum. The company or him. I chose the company. He called me cold, said I was incapable of love, said I'd die alone in my office, surrounded by quarterly reports. That's cruel. That's Marcus. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I told myself I didn't care, threw myself into work even harder, built Northbridge into exactly what I wanted it to be, and convinced myself that was enough. Was it? For a while. Then my father died, and I realized Marcus was right about one thing. I was alone, completely, utterly alone, and I had no idea how to be anything else. How the admission hung between them. Malcolm reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. She didn't pull away. You're not alone now, he said. Aren't I, Malcolm? What are we doing? Really doing? You have a son, a life, responsibilities. I have a company that demands everything from me. We work together, which complicates everything. And even if we figure all that out, what happens when you realize I'm exactly what Marcus said I was? What happens when I choose a board meeting over your soccer game? When I miss Isaiah's birthday because of a client crisis? When I prove that I'm still the same person who can't stop? Malcolm squeezed her hand. You're not the same person. Neither am I. We're both carrying damage from relationships that broke us. But maybe that's exactly why this could work. Or why it could destroy us both. Maybe, but I'd rather risk it than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Adrienne looked at their joined hands. I don't know how to do this. The domestic thing, the relationship thing, I'll mess it up. So will I. We'll mess it up together. That's not reassuring. It's honest. She laughed, a real laugh this time, soft and surprised. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I'm also tired of being safe. They sat in silence, hands still linked, the city humming beyond the windows. Malcolm could hear Isaiah's white noise machine upstairs, the faint sound of traffic, his own heartbeat loud in his ears. Stay tonight, he said. Adrienne's eyes widened. Malcolm! Not like that. Just stay. Sleep in the guest room. Wake up here. Have breakfast with us. Let yourself be part of this for one morning. That's a terrible idea. Probably. Isaiah will have questions. I'll answer them. The boundaries we talked about are still there. This is just... Malcolm searched for the word. Consider it an experiment. Adrienne studied his face, searching for something. Malcolm let her look. Didn't hide, didn't perform. One night, she said finally. One night, but I'm leaving early before Isaiah wakes up. Deal. Malcolm showed her to the guest room, gave her a spare toothbrush and one of his old college t-shirts to sleep in. She stood in the doorway holding the shirt, looking vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. She closed the door before he could respond. Malcolm stood in the hallway for a moment, then went to his own room. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware that Adrienne was 20 feet away, separated by drywall and years of carefully maintained distance. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister. How was dinner with Mystery Woman? Malcolm smiled. Good, really good. Details, Mitchell, details. Tomorrow, I promise. He set the phone down, closed his eyes, didn't sleep. At some point past midnight, he heard footsteps in the hall, a pause outside his door. Then they retreated, and Malcolm lay in the darkness, wondering if Adrienne couldn't sleep either. When his alarm went off at 6 o'clock, Malcolm found a note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for last night, all of it." The guest room was pristine, the t-shirt folded on the bed. The only evidence she'd been there was the wine glasses in the sink and the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. Isaiah came downstairs, rubbing his eyes. "Is Adrienne still here?" "She had to leave early. Work stuff." "Oh." Isaiah looked disappointed. "I wanted to show her my new drawing." You can show her next time." "Will there be a next time?" Malcolm looked at his son, this small person who'd somehow become wise beyond his years. "Yeah, buddy, I think there will." The next 3 weeks unfolded in a rhythm that felt both natural and impossible. Adrienne came for dinner twice more. Malcolm took Isaiah to her penthouse apartment once, a sleek, minimalist space overlooking the lake that Isaiah declared fancy but kind of sad because there's no stuff. "What kind of stuff?" Adrienne had asked. "Like pictures and mess and things that make it look like someone lives here." She'd looked around at her immaculate apartment and said, "You're absolutely right." At work, they maintained professional distance, Malcolm reported to his VP. Adrienne ran the company. They spoke in meetings using the same tone they used with everyone else. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't say anything. But the secret sat between them like a third presence. Malcolm felt it every time Adrienne walked past his desk. Every time her eyes found his across a conference room, every time they carefully avoided being alone together in the office. It was Jennifer who finally broke the silence. "You're sleeping with the CEO, aren't you?" Malcolm looked up from his laptop. They were in the 14th floor break room, ostensibly getting coffee, actually hiding from the chaos of month-end reporting. "What?" Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "Don't play dumb. You've been different for weeks. Lighter, happier, and I've seen the way she looks at you in meetings." "How does she look at me?" "Like you're the only person in the room." Malcolm's stomach dropped. "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yes. To everyone else?" Jennifer shrugged. "Maybe not. Most people are too busy worrying about their own stuff to notice." "But Malcolm, be careful. Office relationships are complicated enough. Office relationships with the CEO, that's nuclear." We filed the disclosure with HR. "I know. Patricia told me over drinks last week, but filing paperwork doesn't change the optics. People will talk. They'll say you're getting preferential treatment. They'll question every decision she makes involving you." "I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're walking into a minefield with your eyes closed." Malcolm poured coffee he didn't want. "It's not like we planned this. The best disasters never are." Jennifer's expression softened. "You think this is a disaster?" "I think you're my friend, and I don't want to see you get hurt. Either of you. Adrienne's brilliant, but she's also ruthless when she needs to be. What happens when the relationship interferes with business? Who wins? The CEO or the boyfriend?" Malcolm had no answer. That night, he lay in bed thinking about Jennifer's words, about optics and perception and the impossible complexity of what he and Adrienne were trying to build. His phone buzzed. A text from Adrienne. "Can't sleep, thinking about you." He typed back, "Same. This is getting complicated. I know, we should talk tomorrow. Your place." Malcolm stared at the message, anxiety coiling in his chest. "Okay, 7 p.m. Isaiah will be at his mom's. See you then." Malcolm set down the phone, but didn't sleep. He spent the hours until dawn running scenarios, playing out conversations, trying to prepare for something he couldn't predict. Adrienne arrived at 7:03 carrying takeout from the Thai place Isaiah loved, and an expression Malcolm couldn't read. "We need to talk about Marcus," she said before she'd even set down the food. Malcolm's blood went cold. "What about him?" Adrienne moved to the couch, sat down heavily. Malcolm joined her, leaving space between them that suddenly felt enormous. "He called me yesterday at the office." "What did he want?" He's back in Chicago," she said. "Opened an investment firm downtown. He's successful now, really successful, and She stopped, started again. "He said he made a mistake, that he was wrong to give me an ultimatum, that he spent 7 years regretting walking away." Malcolm felt something sharp lodge in his chest. "What did you say?" "I said I was seeing someone, that I'd moved on." And And he asked if I was happy. If this person, you, made me happy in a way he never could. What did you tell him? Adrienne looked at Malcolm with eyes that held too much emotion to name. I told him I didn't know yet, that it was new, that I was still figuring it out. The words landed like stones. Malcolm tried to keep his voice steady. Are you still figuring it out? I don't know, Malcolm. Marcus knows me. He knows all my worst parts. He's seen me at my absolute coldest, and he still wants... She inhaled shakily. He said he's ready now, ready to accept my career, ready to be a real partner. 7 years too late. Maybe, or maybe 7 years was what it took for him to grow up, for both of us to grow up. Malcolm stood, needed distance, walked to the window overlooking his quiet street. What do you want me to say? He asked. I want you to tell me I'm crazy for even considering it. But you are considering it. Silence. Malcolm turned. Adrienne sat on the couch looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. I spent 7 years telling myself I didn't need anyone, she said quietly, that I was complete on my own. And then you walked into that restaurant and I realized I'd been lying to myself. But Malcolm, what we have, it's so new, so fragile. We're still learning each other. And Marcus is familiar, known. He represents a path I already understand. Safe, Malcolm said. Yes, you told me you didn't want safe. You wanted real. I said a lot of things. Malcolm felt the careful foundation they'd built start to crack. So what now? He wants to meet for coffee, just to talk. And you want to go? I need closure. I need to know if what I feel for you is real or just... She gestured helplessly. Just newness, just the excitement of something different. Every instinct screamed at Malcolm to fight, to argue, to make his case and demand she choose. But he thought about his marriage falling apart, about desperate attempts to hold on to something already broken, about the damage that came from fighting against inevitability. Okay, he said. Adrienne looked up, surprised. Okay, go meet him. Get your closure. Figure out what you need to figure out. Malcolm's voice stayed steady even as his heart shattered. But Adrienne, I'm not going to wait forever. I'm not going to be the backup plan while you explore what-ifs with your ex. I'm not asking you to be a backup plan. Then what are you asking? Time, space to think. How much time? I don't know. Malcolm walked to this door, opened it. I think you should leave. Malcolm, please, just go. Adrienne stood slowly, gathered her things, stopped in the doorway. I'm sorry, she said. So am I. She left. Malcolm closed the door and stood in the sudden silence of his empty house. The Thai food sat untouched on the counter. The wine they'd been going to share sat unopened. He pulled out his phone, texted his sister. Can you keep Isaiah tonight? I need to be alone. Michelle's response came immediately. What happened? Tell you later. On my way. Malcolm sat on his couch in the darkness and let himself feel it. The hurt, the anger, the bitter recognition that he'd known this was coming, had seen it approaching like a slow-motion car crash, and had been powerless to stop it. His phone buzzed. Not Michelle. Adrienne. I know I have no right to ask this, but please don't hate me. Malcolm stared at this message for a long time before responding. I could never hate you. But I can't do this halfway, Adrienne. I can't be the person you come to when Marcus doesn't work out. I won't do that to myself or to Isaiah. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I understand. Malcolm set down the phone and finally let himself break. The days that followed moved like wading through concrete. Malcolm went through the motions, dropped Isaiah at school with a smile that felt like a mask, sat through client meetings and contributed appropriately and pretended his world hadn't fractured. At night, after Isaiah was asleep, he stood at his window staring at Chicago's lights and wondered if Adrienne was out there somewhere making the choice that would decide both their futures. She didn't call, didn't text. The silence was answer enough. At work, Malcolm saw her exactly once passing in the lobby on Tuesday morning. Their eyes met for half a second. She looked tired. He looked away first. Jennifer appeared at his desk that afternoon with coffee and concern. You look terrible, she said. Thanks. Want to talk about it? Not even a little. She set the coffee down anyway. For what it's worth, she looks just as miserable as you do. Malcolm said nothing. Malcolm, I appreciate it, Jen, I do, but I can't. I just need to focus on work right now. Okay. She squeezed his shoulder and left him alone. Isaiah noticed on Wednesday. They were making dinner together, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Isaiah's favorite, when his son looked up from carefully arranging cheese slices and said, "Did you and Adrienne have a fight?" Malcolm's hand stilled on the spatula. "What makes you think that?" You're sad. You've been sad since Monday, and you keep checking your phone like you're waiting for someone to call. 6 years old and already too perceptive for his own good. "We're just taking some time apart," Malcolm said. "Because of Marcus." Malcolm nearly dropped the spatula. "How do you know about Marcus?" "I heard you on the phone with Aunt Michelle. You said a name, Mark something, and you sounded mad." Malcolm turned off the stove, sat down at the kitchen table across from his son. "Yeah, because of Marcus. Is he Adrienne's boyfriend? He was a long time ago. Now he wants to be again." Isaiah processed this with the same serious concentration he brought to dinosaur taxonomy. Does she want him to be her boyfriend? And I don't know, buddy. She's trying to figure that out. "Do you want her to pick you?" The question was so direct, so honest, it stole Malcolm's breath. "Yes," he said, "I do." "Did you tell her that?" "Sort of." "Dad," Isaiah looked at him with exasperation. "You're supposed to tell people how you feel. That's what you always tell me." "You're right, but sometimes it's complicated." "Why?" "Because sometimes people need to make their own choices without pressure. And I can't make Adrienne choose me. She has to want to." Isaiah thought about this. What if she picks Marcus? Then I'll be sad for a while, but I'll be okay. Will I still get to see her? Malcolm felt something crack in his chest. I don't know. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. Then he climbed into Malcolm's lap, something he rarely did anymore, considering himself too old for such things, and wrapped his arms around his father's neck. "I hope she picks you," he whispered. "I really like her." Malcolm held his son and tried not to break. Thursday brought rain. Heavy, relentless November rain that turned Chicago gray and cold. Malcolm worked from home, grateful for the excuse to avoid the office. He reviewed budgets and answered emails and tried not to think about the fact that it had been 4 days since Adrienne had walked out his door. His phone rang at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Unknown number. Malcolm almost didn't answer. Then some masochistic impulse made him pick up. Malcolm Mitchell. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Lakeside Elementary. I'm calling about Isaiah." Ice flooded Malcolm's veins. "What happened? Is he hurt?" He's fine physically, but there was an incident at recess. Isaiah got into an altercation with another student. It's not like him at all, and I thought you should know." Malcolm was already grabbing his keys. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He made it in 12. Isaiah sat in the principal's office looking small and defiant, arms crossed, jaw set. Mrs. Patterson, his teacher, sat beside him. Dr. Chen stood near the window. "What happened?" Malcolm asked. Isaiah punched Tyler Grayson," Dr. Chen said. "Tyler apparently made a comment about Isaiah's family situation, and Isaiah reacted." Malcolm looked at his son. "Is that true?" Isaiah's jaw worked. "He said I didn't have a real family because you and Mom aren't together. He said you were probably a bad dad because Mom left." The words hit Malcolm like a physical blow. "So you hit him." "He was wrong. You're not a bad dad. You're the best dad." Malcolm crouched down to Isaiah's eye level. "Buddy, I appreciate you defending me, but we don't hit people, ever. You know that." "But I know. And what he said was mean and unfair. But violence isn't the answer." Isaiah's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted him to stop." Malcolm pulled his son into a hug. I know you did." Dr. Chen cleared her throat. "Isaiah will need to sit out recess for the rest of the week, and I'd like to suggest he talk to our school counselor. These kinds of outbursts usually indicate something deeper going on." Malcolm nodded, still holding Isaiah. "Whatever you think is best." They drove home in silence. Isaiah stared out the window, tears tracking down his face. Malcolm's hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. At home, Malcolm made hot chocolate. They sat at the kitchen table, the rain beating against the windows, and Malcolm tried to find the right words. "Talk to me," he said. "What's really going on?" Isaiah wiped his eyes. "I miss Adrienne, and I'm scared you're going to be sad forever, like you were after Mom left." Malcolm's throat tightened. "I wasn't sad forever. You were sad for a really long time. You tried to hide it, but I could tell. And now you're sad again, and I don't know how to fix it." "Isaiah, you don't have to fix it. That's not your job. But you're my dad. I want you to be happy." "I am happy. I have you. That's enough." Isaiah looked at him with heartbreaking skepticism. "Is it?" The question sat between them like a confession. Malcolm thought about lying, about saying yes, about protecting his son from the messy truth of adult emotions. But Isaiah had called him on his sadness, had seen through the performance, and didn't he owe his son honesty? No, Malcolm said quietly. It's not enough. Not anymore. I love you more than anything in this world, Isaiah. But loving you doesn't mean I can't want other things too. Doesn't mean I can't want someone to share my life with. Someone who makes me feel, he searched for the word, alive. Adrienne makes you feel alive. Yeah, he said, she does. Then why did you let her go? Because sometimes loving someone means giving them space to figure out what they want, even when it hurts. Isaiah absorbed this. That's really hard. The hardest thing I've ever done. They sat in silence, drinking hot chocolate while rain drummed overhead. Malcolm thought about calling the school counselor himself, about admitting that maybe he needed help processing this too. His phone buzzed. A text from Adrienne. Can we talk, please? Malcolm stared at this message, his heart hammering against his ribs. Is that her? Isaiah asked. Yeah. What does she want? To talk. Are you going to? Malcolm looked at his son, this small person who'd just gotten into a fight defending him, who worried about his happiness, who somehow understood that love was complicated and messy and worth fighting for. I don't know, Malcolm said honestly. But even as he said it, his fingers were moving, typing a response before his brain could intervene. When? The reply came immediately. Tonight, the waterfront where we went that first night after dinner. Malcolm's stomach twisted. What time? 8. He looked at Isaiah. I need to go out tonight. Can you handle staying with Aunt Michelle again? Isaiah nodded solemnly. You should go. You should hear what she has to say. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just didn't notice. Malcolm called Michelle, who agreed to come over without asking questions. Then he sat on his couch, watching the clock crawl toward evening, and tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming. Michelle arrived at 7:15, took one look at Malcolm, and pulled him into a hug. Whatever happens, she said, you're going to be okay. I know. Do you? Malcolm pulled back. I'm choosing to believe it. That has to be enough. He kissed Isaiah goodbye. Good luck, Dad. And drove through rain-slicked streets to the waterfront. The Chicago River stretched dark and infinite under a sky heavy with clouds. Malcolm parked and walked to the railing where he and Adrienne had stood after their first dinner together when everything had felt possible and terrifying and new. She was already there. Adrienne stood with her back to him, staring out at the water, coat pulled tight against the November cold. Malcolm's footsteps on the wet concrete made her turn. She looked exhausted, beautiful and exhausted and vulnerable in a way that made Malcolm's chest ache. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood 5 feet apart. The distance felt enormous. Thank you for coming, Adrienne said. You asked me to. I wasn't sure you would. Malcolm shoved his hands in his pockets. What did you want to talk about? Adrienne took a shaky breath. I saw Marcus Tuesday afternoon. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Malcolm braced himself. And he was exactly like I remembered. Charming, successful. He'd prepared this whole speech about how he'd changed. How he understood now what I needed. How he was ready to be the partner I deserved. Sounds perfect. It should have been. 7 years ago, it would have been everything I wanted. Adrienne turned back to the water. He talked about his company, his achievements, his 5-year plan. He talked about how we could build an empire together. How our combined networks and resources could make us unstoppable. Everything you ever wanted, Malcolm said flatly. Everything I thought I wanted. Adrienne's voice broke. And all I could think about was you. About Isaiah asking if I liked dinosaurs. About reading him bedtime stories. About the way you look at me like I'm more than my resume. About your ridiculous grocery spreadsheet and your son's Lego cities. And the fact that your house feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived. Malcolm's heart hammered. Adrienne, I compared everything Marcus said to you, Malcolm. Every promise, every plan, every vision of the future. And you won every single time. Because Marcus was offering me more of what I already have. But you, she turned to face him, you were offering me something I've never had. A real life. With real mess and real complications and real love. Tears tracked down her face, mixing with the mist from the river. I told Marcus no, she said. I told him I was in love with someone else. Someone who made me want to be brave instead of safe. Someone who sees past the CEO to the woman who's terrified of chihuahuas and doesn't know how to do domestic but wants to learn. Malcolm couldn't breathe. You told him you were in love. Yes. With me? Yes. Adrienne stepped closer. I'm in love with you, Malcolm Mitchell. I'm in love with your son and your grocery spreadsheets and the way you make me believe I can be more than just my work. I'm in love with the life we could build together if you're still willing to risk it. Malcolm closed the distance between them, cupped her face in his hands. You're sure? Completely terrified and completely sure. Those 4 days were the longest of my life. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I put you through that. Why did you? Because I needed to know. Needed to look Marcus in the eye and confirm what I already knew in my heart. That what I feel for you isn't just newness or rebellion or fear of being alone. It's real. It's solid. It's worth fighting for. Malcolm kissed her right there on the waterfront, with the river flowing beneath them and the city lights reflecting in the water. He kissed her like he'd wanted to since that first dinner, since she'd admitted to fearing dogs, since she'd read Isaiah bedtime stories with absolute focus. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrienne was smiling through her tears. I don't know how to do this, she said. The relationship thing, the domestic thing, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to choose work at the wrong times. I'm going to struggle with vulnerability and compromise and all the things that make relationships work. So will I, Malcolm said. I'm going to be overprotective of Isaiah. I'm going to worry about optics at work. I'm going to panic when things feel too good because I'm used to things falling apart. We're a disaster. A beautiful disaster. Adrienne laughed. Isaiah's going to be so smug. He told me I should pick you. Malcolm pulled back. When did you talk to Isaiah? Yesterday. I went to his school. Asked his teacher if I could see him during lunch. I needed to know if he'd be okay with this. With me. And he asked me 3 questions. 1, did I like you? 2, would I be nice to his dad? 3, did I promise to never leave without saying goodbye? What did you tell him? I told him yes to all 3. Then he gave me a hug and told me I better not mess this up because his dad deserves to be happy. Malcolm felt his eyes sting. He said that word for word. He got in a fight today, Malcolm said. Punched a kid who said I was a bad father. Adrienne's eyes widened. Is he okay? He's fine. Suspended from recess, but fine. Malcolm pulled her close again. He's been worried about me. About us? I didn't realize how much he was carrying. Kids see everything. Yeah, Malcolm said. They do. They stood holding each other while the river flowed and the city moved around them. Malcolm felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty exactly, but something close. Hope, trust, the belief that maybe this could work. What happens now? Adrienne asked. Now we go home to my place, where Isaiah is probably driving my sister crazy, waiting to hear what happened. And after that? After that, we figure it out one day at a time. No more running, no more hiding behind fear. Together. They walked back to their cars, hand in hand. Adrienne followed Malcolm through rain-slicked streets to his townhouse, where lights blazed in every window. Michelle opened the door before Malcolm could use his key. Well? It's good, Malcolm said. It's better than good, Adrienne added. Michelle looked between them and grinned. Isaiah, your dad's not sad anymore. Thunder of small feet on stairs. Isaiah appeared, dinosaur pajamas and wild curls, eyes bright with hope. Did you pick him? He asked Adrienne. I picked him. Isaiah launched himself at both of them, arms wrapping around their waists, and Malcolm felt something in his chest expand to impossible size. I knew you would, Isaiah said. I told Dad you were smart. Michelle grabbed her coat, still smiling. I'll leave you 3 to celebrate. Malcolm, call me tomorrow. Adrienne, welcome to the family chaos. I'm looking forward to it. After Michelle left, they migrated to the couch. Isaiah sat between them, full of questions about what happened and what it meant, and whether Adrienne was going to live with them now. Not right away, Adrienne said, but maybe eventually, if that's okay with you. Isaiah considered this. Can you bring your fancy wine glasses? Absolutely. And will you help Dad cook? Because he's good at pasta, but terrible at everything else. Hey, Malcolm protested. It's true, Dad. Your chicken is always dry. Adrienne laughed, that real, unguarded laugh Malcolm loved. I'll help with the cooking. They talked until Isaiah's eyes grew heavy. Malcolm carried him to bed, Adrienne following. They tucked him in together, this new configuration of family that felt both strange and right. Night, buddy, Malcolm said. Night, Dad. Night, Adrienne. Good night, Isaiah. Adrienne? Yes? I'm really glad you came back. Her voice was thick when she answered. Me too. Downstairs alone, finally, Malcolm pulled Adrienne close. Stay tonight? He asked. For real this time? Not in the guest room? Yes. They moved to his bedroom, sat on the edge of his bed, fully clothed, holding hands like teenagers. I'm nervous, Adrienne admitted. So am I. I haven't done this in a long time. We don't have to. I want to. I'm just scared. Yeah. Malcolm kissed her forehead. Me too. But we've got time. No rush. No expectations. They lay down together, still fully dressed, and talked in the darkness about childhood and dreams and all the things that had led them to this moment. Adrienne told him about growing up watching her father build houses, about learning to equate love with creation. Malcolm told her about his mother, about losing her to cancer when he was 23, about how that loss had shaped his fear of losing anyone else he loved. You're not going to lose me, Adrienne whispered. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise to fight like hell to stay. They fell asleep tangled together. And when Malcolm woke at 3 a.m. to find Adrienne still there, still real, still breathing softly beside him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Morning came with Isaiah knocking on the door. Dad, can we make pancakes? I want to show Adrienne your special recipe. Malcolm looked at Adrienne, rumpled and beautiful in his old t-shirt, and grinned. Welcome to domestic life, he said. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. They made pancakes together, Malcolm cooking, Adrienne helping Isaiah set the table, the three of them moving around the small kitchen with gradually increasing coordination. It wasn't perfect. Malcolm burned the first batch. Isaiah spilled orange juice. Adrienne admitted she had no idea how to flip a pancake and proved it spectacularly. But it was real. It was messy. It was exactly what Adrienne had been missing her entire life. After breakfast, Isaiah insisted on showing Adrienne his entire dinosaur collection again, this time with additional commentary on recent discoveries he'd learned from the book she'd given him. Malcolm watched them from the doorway and pulled out his phone. A text to Michelle. Thank you for last night. Her response. That's what family is for. She's staying? Yeah, she's staying. Good. Don't screw it up. Malcolm smiled and pocketed his phone. Later, when Isaiah was occupied with Legos and Adrienne stood at the window watching the city beyond, Malcolm came up behind her. You okay? He asked. I keep waiting for the panic to set in, for the voice that tells me I'm making a mistake, that I should run back to the safety of just work. Is it there? No. She turned to face him. For the first time in my life, that voice is completely quiet. What do you hear instead? You, Isaiah. The sound of a life I actually want to live. Malcolm kissed her softly. I love you. Adrienne's eyes widened. I love you. I should have said it on the waterfront. Should have said it the first time you admitted to fearing dogs, but I'm saying it now. I love you too, she whispered. So much it terrifies me. Good, be terrified with me. Okay. They stood at the window holding each other, while Isaiah built Lego cities, and Chicago hummed beyond the glass, and the future stretched out uncertain and beautiful and theirs. The weeks that followed were not seamless. Adrienne moved some of her things into Malcolm's townhouse gradually. A drawer of clothes here, toiletries there, her laptop claiming permanent residence on the kitchen counter. They didn't announce it, didn't make it official, it just happened. One breakfast at a time, one evening spent reviewing Isaiah's homework while Malcolm cooked dinner. One morning, waking up tangled together and realizing neither of them wanted to be anywhere else. But reality had sharp edges. At work, the whispers started almost immediately. Malcolm heard them in break room conversations that stopped when he entered, saw them in the sidelong glances when he and Adrienne passed in hallways. Jennifer had been right. Filing disclosure with HR didn't stop people from having opinions. The first real test came 3 weeks after that night at the waterfront. Malcolm sat in the Thursday operations meeting presenting his analysis on the Henderson account transition when Craig Morrison from Business Development interrupted. With all due respect, Malcolm, I think you're underestimating the implementation timeline. 6 weeks isn't realistic. The data supports 6 weeks, Malcolm said evenly. I've built in buffers for, or maybe you're being optimistic because certain people want to hear good news. Craig's eyes flicked to Adrienne at the head of the table. The room went silent. Malcolm felt heat crawl up his neck. My analysis is based on comparable transitions we've executed in the past 18 months. I'm happy to walk through the methodology. I'm sure you are. Craig leaned back in his chair. I'm just saying, when you're personally involved with the person making final decisions, objectivity gets complicated. Adrienne's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Mr. Morrison, are you suggesting that Mr. Mitchell's professional judgment is compromised? Craig had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm just raising a concern that I think others share. Then let me be clear. Adrienne's tone was ice. Malcolm Mitchell has been delivering exceptional analysis for this company long before our personal relationship began. His work is thoroughly documented, peer-reviewed, and consistently accurate. If you have specific concerns about his methodology, present them with data. Otherwise, we're wasting time that could be spent actually discussing the Henderson transition. She turned to Malcolm. Continue your presentation. Malcolm finished, hard-hammering, hyper-aware of every eye on him. When the meeting ended, he gathered his materials and left quickly, avoiding Adrienne's gaze. She found him at his desk 20 minutes later. My office, she said quietly. Please. Malcolm followed her to the 15th floor, past Patricia's knowing look, into the sanctuary of Adrienne's office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and impossible view. She closed the door, turned to face him. I shouldn't have done that, she said. Done what? Defended you so publicly. I made it worse, made it look exactly like what Craig was implying, that I'm protecting you, showing favoritism. Malcolm set down his files. You were defending my work, not me. The room doesn't know the difference. Adrienne moved to the window, arms crossed. This is what I was afraid of. That being together would undermine your credibility. Make people question every decision I make involving you. So what are you saying? I don't know. She turned to him, and Malcolm saw genuine fear in her eyes. I won't let our relationship damage your career, Malcolm. You've worked too hard to have it reduced to office gossip about sleeping your way to the top. No one thinks that. Craig clearly does. And if he does, others will too. Malcolm walked to her, took her hands. Then we prove them wrong. We do the work. We maintain boundaries. We let the results speak for themselves. And if that's not enough, then we deal with it together. Adrienne pulled him close, rested her forehead against his. I don't want you to resent me for this. I could never resent you. You say that now, but what happens when you get passed over for a promotion because people assume it's favoritism? What happens when your colleagues stop trusting your judgment because they think I'm influencing you? Malcolm pulled back enough to meet her eyes. What happened to being brave instead of safe? That was before I realized how much you have to lose. I'm not losing anything. He kissed her softly. I'm gaining everything that matters. We knew this would be complicated. We chose it anyway. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed. Then we adapt. They stood holding each other while Chicago sprawled below them, and the future felt both fragile and worth fighting for. That night, Malcolm came home to find Isaiah and Adrienne on the living room floor, surrounded by Legos, building what appeared to be a dinosaur habitat complete with volcano and prehistoric vegetation. Dad, look, Isaiah gestured proudly. Adrienne found instructions online for a T-Rex, a real one with moving parts. Malcolm looked at Adrienne, who was studying a diagram with absolute concentration, and felt his heart do something complicated. Pretty impressive, he said. Wait till you see. The Velociraptor pack we're building next, Adrienne replied without looking up. Isaiah designed it himself. They worked on Legos until dinner, ate pasta at the kitchen table, and Malcolm watched his son and the woman he loved discuss Jurassic period flora with complete seriousness and thought about how this exact moment was everything he'd never known he wanted. After Isaiah was asleep, Malcolm and Adrienne sat on the couch with wine and the comfortable silence of people learning to exist together. I've been thinking, Adrienne said, about work, about us, about how to make this sustainable. Malcolm set down his wine. I'm listening. I think we need clear boundaries, not just the ones we agreed on, professional distance in the office, but actual structural boundaries. I'm going to recuse myself from any decisions directly involving your career. Promotions, raises, assignments, your VP will handle all of that. I'll have no input. Adrienne, it's the only way to protect you, to protect your credibility. If people can point to a clear separation between our personal relationship and professional hierarchy, the gossip loses power. Malcolm considered this. You're willing to give up influence over my career advancement. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure you get the recognition you deserve on your own merits. Not because you're sleeping with the CEO. That's not how anyone sees it. Not yet, but Craig's comment today, that's just the beginning. We need to get ahead of it. Malcolm took her hand. Okay, if you think that's what we need to do, I trust you. You sure? Completely. She kissed him, and for a moment the complications fell away, and there was just this. Two people choosing each other despite every obstacle in their path. The structural changes were implemented within a week. Adrienne sent a company-wide memo clarifying reporting structures and recusal policies. It was professional, thorough, and made crystal clear that Malcolm Mitchell's career trajectory was entirely independent of the CEO's personal life. The gossip didn't stop, but it quieted. Thanksgiving arrived with the weight of new traditions. Malcolm typically spent the holiday at Michelle's house with her family and a rotating cast of relatives. This year, Isaiah asked if Adrienne could come. Of course, Michelle said when Malcolm called to ask. She's family now, right? Yeah, Malcolm said, surprised by how easily the word came. She is. Thanksgiving morning found them in Michelle's crowded kitchen. Adrienne wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook," and looking adorably out of place among Michelle's chaos of children and casserole dishes and competing timers. I don't know what I'm doing, Adrienne admitted, holding a potato peeler like it might attack her. Just peel, Michelle instructed. Doesn't have to be perfect. Malcolm watched Adrienne approach potato peeling with the same focused intensity she brought to board meetings and felt Michelle elbow him in the ribs. Stop staring at her like a lovesick puppy, his sister whispered. I'm not. Oh, you absolutely are. It's disgusting. I love it. The day unfolded in beautiful chaos. Isaiah played with his cousins. Adrienne learned to peel potatoes and admitted she'd never actually cooked a Thanksgiving dinner in her life. Michelle's husband Tom talked business with Malcolm while keeping one eye on the football game. The house smelled like turkey and possibility. At dinner, Michelle's youngest started the tradition of saying what everyone was thankful for. When it came to Isaiah's turn, he said, I'm thankful Dad isn't sad anymore, and I'm thankful for Adrienne because she makes him happy and she's teaching me about feathered dinosaurs. Adrienne's eyes went bright with tears. She squeezed Isaiah's hand across the table. When it was her turn, she said simply, I'm thankful for this, all of this, for being included in something I never thought I'd have. Later, helping clean up while the kids watched a movie in the living room, Michelle cornered Malcolm by the sink. She's good for you, she said. I know. I mean really good. I haven't seen you this alive since before the divorce. Maybe even before that. Malcolm dried a plate, considering. She scares me. Good relationships should be a little scary. What if I mess it up? Then you apologize and do better. That's how relationships work. Michelle handed him another plate. But Malcolm, stop waiting for it to fall apart. You've been bracing for disaster since the moment you met her. Maybe try believing it could actually work. The words settled into Malcolm's chest and stayed there. December came with early snow and the looming question of what to do about Christmas. Isaiah's custody arrangement meant he'd spend Christmas Eve with his mother and Christmas Day with Malcolm. It had been the routine for 2 years, but this year felt different. Can Adrienne be there on Christmas? Isaiah asked one evening while they decorated the tree, a slightly lopsided Douglas fir that Adrienne had insisted was charming. Do you want her to be? Malcolm asked. Yeah, she's part of our family now. Adrienne, who was untangling lights with the patience of someone solving a complex equation, looked up. Isaiah, that's sweet, but Christmas is special. If you want it to just be you and your dad, I want you there too, Isaiah interrupted. We're better with 3 people. Later, after Isaiah was asleep, Malcolm found Adrienne standing at the window staring at Chicago's skyline dusted with snow. You okay? He asked. He said, we're better with 3 people. He did. I've never been part of someone's better before. Her voice cracked. I've been tolerated, accommodated, worked around, but never essential. Malcolm wrapped his arms around her from behind. You're essential to us. What if I let you down? What if I get so caught up in work that I miss the important things? What if I prove Marcus right and choose the company over everything else? Then we'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. Adrienne, I'm not Marcus. I'm not going to give you an ultimatum, but I am going to call you on it when work becomes an escape instead of a passion. She turned in his arms. How will you know the difference? Because I know you now. I know when you're working because you love it, and when you're working because you're afraid of being still. Adrienne kissed him like he'd given her absolution. I don't deserve you. That's not how this works. How does it work? We deserve each other, damage and all. Christmas arrived with the kind of crystalline cold that made Chicago look like a snow globe. Isaiah returned from his mother's house, Christmas morning, laden with presents and stories about his grandmother's cookies. Adrienne had stayed the night, and together they made breakfast while Isaiah provided running commentary on every gift he'd received. Mom asked about you, Isaiah said to Adrienne around a mouthful of pancake. Malcolm's hand stilled on the spatula. What did she ask? If you were nice, if Dad was happy, if you were going to get married. Adrienne nearly dropped her coffee. What did you tell her? That you're really nice and Dad smiles a lot now, and probably yes to the married thing because you guys are gross and in love. Malcolm looked at Adrienne. Adrienne looked at Malcolm. Neither of them corrected Isaiah's assessment. They opened presents in the living room, the tree lights competing with morning sun. Malcolm had gotten Adrienne a first edition of her favorite book, a memoir about building businesses she had mentioned once in passing. She'd gotten him a weekend away, just the two of them, at a bed and breakfast upstate. Michelle already agreed to take Isaiah, she said, if you want to go. I want to go. Isaiah, oblivious to adult subtext, was already tearing into his presence. The Lego set Adrienne had gotten him. New books about paleontology. A dinosaur sweater from Aunt Michelle that he immediately put on over his pajamas. Later, after the chaos had settled and Isaiah was occupied with building Legos, Malcolm pulled Adrienne into the kitchen. Did Isaiah's question about marriage freak you out? He asked. Terrify me, actually. In a bad way? Adrienne thought about it. In a way that makes me realize how much I want it, which is terrifying because I never wanted it before. Never let myself want it. And now... She looked up at him. Now I want everything. The whole absurd domestic package. Marriage and messy mornings and arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash. I want to build Lego dinosaurs and attend Isaiah's school events and wake up next to you for the next 50 years. Malcolm pulled her close. That sounds like a plan. Is it crazy? Completely insane. Good. They stood in the kitchen holding each other while Isaiah sang Christmas carols off-key in the living room, and snow fell beyond the windows, and the future stretched out uncertain and beautiful and theirs. Winter deepened into the new year. Work continued. Malcolm's projects succeeded on their own merits. Adrienne's recusal policy held. The gossip faded into background noise as people found new things to talk about. At home, they fell into rhythms. Adrienne started spending more nights at the townhouse than at her penthouse. Her mail arrived at Malcolm's address. Her wine glasses migrated to his cabinets. Isaiah stopped asking if she was going to live with them and started assuming she already did. In February, Malcolm's ex-wife called. We need to talk about Isaiah's custody arrangement, she said. Malcolm's stomach dropped. Is something wrong? No, actually the opposite. I'm getting remarried. Moving to Minneapolis for my fiance's job. I want to modify the agreement so Isaiah stays primarily with you. I'll take him for extended visits during summer and holidays, but I think he needs stability, and you can give him that better than I can right now. Malcolm sat down heavily. You're serious? Completely. My lawyer's drafting the paperwork. I'm not trying to disappear from his life, Malcolm. I'm starting over, and Isaiah's happy with you and Adrienne. You know about Adrienne? Isaiah talks about her constantly. She sounds good for both of you. They hammered out details. Malcolm hung up feeling like the ground had shifted beneath him. That night, he told Adrienne, Isaiah's going to live with us full time, he said carefully. His mom will visit, but he's ours to raise. Adrienne went very still. Us? You said us? Yeah, is that okay? Malcolm, I don't know how to be a mother. You don't have to be his mother. You just have to be you, which is already more than enough. What if I'm terrible at it? Dur, you won't be. You already love him. I see it every time you help him with homework or listen to him talk about dinosaurs or read him bedtime stories. You might not know how to be a traditional parent, but you know how to be present. That's what matters. Adrienne's hands shook as she reached for him. This is real. We're really doing this. If you want to. I want to. Tears shone in her eyes. I'm terrified, but I want to. Malcolm kissed her, tasting salt. Then we're doing this. They told Isaiah together. He took the news of his mother's move with surprising equanimity. So, I get to stay here all the time, he asked. If that's okay with you, Malcolm said. And Adrienne will be here too. Yes, Adrienne said. Isaiah considered this. Can we get a dog? Malcolm and Adrienne exchanged glances. Absolutely not, Adrienne said. But you're part of the family now, and families have dogs. Families also have people who are completely terrified of dogs, Adrienne countered. We've discussed this. What about a really small dog? Like a tiny one that doesn't look like a dog? Still no. A cat, Malcolm laughed. We'll think about it. Isaiah accepted this with good grace and went back to his Legos, apparently satisfied that his world was expanding rather than contracting. Spring arrived with sudden warmth and the annual Northbridge Dynamics Company retreat, a weekend event at a resort in Wisconsin where employees endured team-building exercises and the executive team pretended to enjoy trust falls. Malcolm had always hated these retreats. This year felt different because Adrienne would be there, and even though they had to maintain professional distance, just being in the same space felt like a small victory. The second night, after dinner and enforced socializing, Malcolm found Adrienne on the resort's deck overlooking a lake that looked nothing like Lake Michigan but tried its best. You're not supposed to be here, she said without turning around. Neither are you. Everyone else is at the bar. I needed air. Malcolm stood beside her, careful to maintain appropriate distance. You okay? I've been thinking about something. What? About what happens next, for us. Malcolm's heart rate picked up. And I don't want to live in two places anymore. I don't want to split my time between your townhouse and my penthouse. She turned to face him. I want to wake up in the same place every morning with you and Isaiah. I want that to be normal instead of special. Are you asking to move in officially? I'm asking if you want me to. Malcolm reached for her hand. Protocol be damned. I want you to. Isaiah wants you to. We've wanted you to for months. My lease is up in June. Then in June you move in. Officially. Completely. Adrienne smiled and Malcolm saw relief and joy and terror all mixed together in her expression. Okay. They stood on the deck holding hands while the lake reflected stars, and the future clicked into place, one decision at a time. June came with humidity and the logistical chaos of combining two lives into one space. Adrienne's minimalist furniture clashed with Malcolm's lived-in aesthetic. Her wine collection required a dedicated storage solution. Her work wardrobe took up more closet space than Malcolm and Isaiah's clothes combined. But they made it work. Compromised on furniture, built shelves for wine, reorganized closets with the same focus Adrienne brought to corporate restructuring. Isaiah helped, offering opinions on where Adrienne's desk should go and insisting that her dinosaur book collection be integrated with his own. We're a library now, he declared, a dinosaur library. The best kind, Adrienne agreed. The first morning, Adrienne woke up with no other address to go back to. She panicked. Malcolm found her in the kitchen at 5 a.m., staring at coffee she hadn't drunk. Talk to me, he said. What if this was a mistake? What if we moved too fast? What if... Adrienne, he took her hands. Breathe. She breathed. This is scary, Malcolm said. It's supposed to be scary. You just gave up your independence, your space, your escape route. That's terrifying. But you did it anyway because this us is worth the fear. What if I'm wrong? Then we figure it out, but you're not wrong. Adrienne looked around the kitchen, at Isaiah's drawings on the refrigerator, at the coffee maker they'd chosen together, at the evidence of a life being built from scratch. I've never belonged anywhere before, she said quietly. You belong here. She kissed him like he'd given her permission to believe it. Summer unfolded in golden moments. Isaiah finished first grade with excellent grades and a teacher's note praising his curiosity. They took a weekend trip upstate to the bed and breakfast Adrienne had given Malcolm for Christmas. Adrienne hired a new VP at Northbridge and successfully closed the largest contract in the company's history. Life happened, messy and beautiful and real. In August, Malcolm started planning. He'd known for months what he wanted to do, but knowing and executing were different things. He needed help. He needed Isaiah. "Can I ask you something?" Malcolm said one evening while they made dinner together. "Always. How would you feel if I asked Adrienne to marry me?" Isaiah looked up from the vegetables he was washing, eyes wide. "For real?" "For real." He threw his arms around Malcolm, getting them both wet from the vegetables. "When? How? Can I help?" "I was hoping you'd help me plan it." They spent the next 2 weeks conspiring. Malcolm bought a ring, a simple band with a single diamond that felt right. Not too flashy, not too restrained, just honest. Isaiah designed the plan with the same focus he brought to Lego construction. "It has to be somewhere special," Isaiah insisted. "Somewhere that means something." "Where do you think?" Isaiah considered. "The waterfront, where she told you she picked you?" Malcolm looked at his son and marveled at his emotional intelligence. "That's perfect, buddy. And I should be there. I'm part of this too." "You absolutely should be there." They picked a Saturday in late August, told Adrienne they were going downtown for dinner. Nothing special, just the three of them. She accepted without question, used to their impromptu adventures. Malcolm had never been so nervous in his life. They walked along the waterfront as the sun started its descent, painting Chicago's skyline in shades of amber and rose. Isaiah held Malcolm's hand on one side, chattering about a new dinosaur documentary he'd watched. Adrienne walked beside them, relaxed and happy, completely unsuspecting. When they reached the spot where Malcolm had stood 9 months ago, hearing Adrienne choose him over Marcus, he stopped. "This is nice," Adrienne said, looking out at the river. "I love this view." "Me too," Malcolm said, his heart hammering against his ribs. Isaiah squeezed his hand. Malcolm looked down at his son, who nodded encouragement, and reached into his pocket for the small velvet box they'd hidden there. Adrienne saw. "Malcolm," he said, 9 months ago you stood here and told me you'd chosen me, that what we had was worth fighting for. You said you wanted real instead of safe." "Malcolm, let me finish." He took the box from Isaiah, whose eyes were bright with excitement. "You've given me more than I ever thought I'd have again. You've given Isaiah a family that's whole instead of broken. You've given us both someone to build a life with instead of just survive one." He opened the box. Adrienne's hand flew to her mouth. "You walked into my life like a risk I wasn't prepared for," Malcolm continued. "You stayed like something I can't imagine losing. You've learned to make pancakes and build Lego dinosaurs and love a 6-year-old who asks too many questions. You've made our chaos feel like home." Malcolm got down on one knee. Isaiah moved closer to Adrienne, took her hand, anchored her to the moment. "Adrienne Cole, will you marry me?" The sunset painted her face in gold. Tears tracked down her cheeks. She looked at Malcolm, then at Isaiah, then back at Malcolm. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Isaiah cheered before anyone could move, throwing his arms around both of them. Adrienne laughed through tears, and Malcolm slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. They stood on the waterfront, Malcolm and Adrienne and Isaiah tangled together while the city moved around them and the river flowed beneath, and everything they'd fought for settled into place. "I love you," Adrienne said. "Both of you. So much." "We love you too," Isaiah said matter-of-factly. "That's why we're getting married." Malcolm pulled them both close. "Couldn't have said it better myself." Later, after they'd called Michelle and celebrated with ice cream, and Isaiah had finally crashed from the excitement, Malcolm and Adrienne sat on their couch in the home they'd built together. "Are you scared?" Malcolm asked. "Terrified," Adrienne admitted, "but in the best possible way." "Me too." She held up her hand, watching the ring catch the light. "I never thought I'd have this, any of this. Neither did I. We're really doing this, getting married, building a life, being a family. We really are." Adrienne leaned against him, and Malcolm felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This woman who'd been afraid to want anything beyond work. This man who'd been afraid to risk anything beyond survival. This boy who'd brought them together with dinosaur facts and impossible wisdom. A family built from broken pieces and brave choices. That night, Adrienne's phone buzzed with a work email. She looked at it, then silenced her phone and set it aside. "Not tonight," she said. You sure? If it's important. It can wait, she kissed him. Tonight is for us. Work can have me tomorrow. Tonight, I'm exactly where I want to be. Malcolm held her close and thought about the journey they'd taken. From that first dinner where Adrienne had arranged her own blind date to this moment, engaged and planning a future that neither of them had seen coming. She'd told him once that she'd spent 7 years convincing herself she didn't need anyone. That work was enough. That achievement equaled fulfillment. She'd been wrong. And Malcolm, who'd spent 2 years hiding behind fatherhood and responsibility, who'd convinced himself that protecting Isaiah meant protecting himself from feeling anything, had been wrong too. They'd both been so wrong, but they'd been brave enough to admit it, brave enough to risk, brave enough to believe that broken people could build something whole. The CEO who'd arranged her own blind date had been ready to risk everything. The single father who'd almost canceled had finally said yes to something bigger than safety. Together, they'd chosen love fully, messily, courageously. And that made all the difference.